All right, so let's talk about Susan Sontag and paper number 2. So first thing I should mention is make sure you have a notebook out, or if you take your notes on your laptop or on your tablet, take that out now, because I'm going to give you some notes that'll be, I hope, be very helpful, not only for this reading, but also for paper number 2. A couple other things I want to mention before I talk about the essay would be that in this video, I'm just going to focus on Sontag's essay on photography itself. So I'm not going to talk about the Dwayne Johnson essay, which is sort of a supplement to this one. We'll do that in the next video. Also, for the structure for paper number 2, I'm going to have a separate video on that, as I did for paper number 1, where I'll talk about the structure and how to put the essay together. So that'll be a separate video. I just want to talk about the essay itself because it's one of the more complex ones that we're going to read this semester. So I really want you to take your time to read it. Also, I really strongly urge you to start this paper as soon as you can. It's more complex than the first one. There's 3 topics to select from. It's really not the kind of essay to write the day before or the day of the due date, because there's a lot going on in this essay. And you're going to be using more quoted material, more cited material, which I'll also talk about in the video on the paper. And the reading itself is challenging. I definitely would recommend having a dictionary on hand, whether it's electronic or a book dictionary, so that you can look up words you're not familiar with. It's actually a very simple structure. This is a very traditionally structured miniature essay from this chapter. It's got a thesis. It's got a 3-point thesis, actually, that she then elaborates on in the middle of the piece. And the 3 topics that I have for you for this paper all relate to the 3 parts of the essay. So I should mention that as well. When you're writing about this, you're only going to be responsible for the part of the essay that relates to your topic. And in a second, when I show you the essay, you'll kind of see how it all connects together. This essay also connects in pretty well with the first 2 pieces that we read, the Toni Morrison and the Mike Rose. Those 2 pieces are really about family, and I mentioned that before, especially even in the way that they're both sort of paying tribute to their parents, to the things they learned from their parents about work and how work relates to your own sense of worth and sense of value. And this picks up with those themes, except in Sontag's case, at least for the first half of the essay, she's focused on family photography, images and photographs of family, what that means, why they were significant, why they became popular, 120 years ago, and why they remain popular today. So again, this is really an essay that you want to start as early as you can, start taking notes on it, really think about it. You can Zoom with me if you want to. I'll be doing another set of Zoom check-ins, optional ones next week if you want to log on live with me and some of your other classmates with any questions on this reading or on the paper. The other thing I want to mention, thank you again for sending in paper number 1. And when you get those back, what you're going to notice is that not only will you have my comments in the grade, but you'll have details for the next paper. So every time you turn a paper in, and I turn it back the week later, I give you suggestions on what to work on for the next paper. And some of you early on, asked some really good questions about how to do well in the class. I got emails saying, well, how do I do well in my papers? How do I do well on my assignments? And what I've mentioned is that it's critical to do the papers in the class. I'll give you an example. I had a student last year that had missed a lot of the assignments, and at the very end of the class said, oh, is there any extra credit that I can take? Or, if I took the midterm, so does that mean I still have an ability to pass? And sadly, I said, well, no, if you don't complete the papers, then there's no way to pass the class. Even skipping one paper is going to throw off the whole schedule for you, because every paper we do builds on the one that came before. So they get a little bit longer as we go forward. And as I said, each time I'll give you feedback that will also say, try this on the next paper. You've got some issues with run-on sentences, so maybe work on that, or you work on analyzing your quotations more effectively or in more detail. So I'm always looking ahead, and I want to see where you were with your writing and where you can take it next. And so that's why we have papers also due every 2 weeks, so that you can just keep building those skills. Rather than writing one giant paper at the end of the semester. We just don't have that kind of, that's not the way I teach my classes. I think it's better to do these smaller pieces in increments. So that's why it's really important to keep up. So if you're having any trouble with these assignments, please let me know, and I'll be happy to help. I'm happy to read drafts, but I really want to stress with this one, to start it as soon as you can. It's really not the kind of paper designed to be written the night before, the day of, because there's just too many moving parts to it, as you'll see, even about the essay itself. So with that little introduction, let's jump in. Let me do a screen share here, show you where the essay is. This is in the folder for paper number 2. So if you click, I've already opened that folder here in my computer. And you've got the Dwayne Johnson piece, which we'll talk about separately, because you have to give The Rock his own video. There's no way I can talk about The Rock and not give him his own video lecture about that. So we'll save that for later on. So let's go into this essay. You click on it. It might take a second for it to open, depending on your connection. If you want to print it out, you're welcome to. It's 4 pages long. It's from a much longer book. I don't have an electronic version of this, so this excerpt I think will do nicely. You can enlarge it too if you're reading it on your screen. You can print it out if you want to, or download it onto your computer. And so one thing I should mention is, skip this paragraph at the top of page 8. It's from another section of the essay. And then when you get to page 12, this section here is deliberately cut off because it goes into another part of her argument. So this is the one we're focusing on. It starts here on page 8 with recently photography. And just to lay out the whole piece for you, in this mini essay, what she's writing about is not only the history of photography, but also the significance of 3 different types of photographs. So write these down, because these are the 3 types of photographs that you can select from in your topic for paper number 2. So there's 3 topics, and they relate to the 3 parts of this essay. First part of the essay, she writes about family photographs. So when she writes about family photographs on pages 8, so page 8 and page 9, and this part you see I have underlined, this is from my copy of the book. This is where she talks about the history of photography, how meaningful it was for families when this became a more widely accessible kind of technology about 100, 120 years ago, and also why it was so significant at the beginning of the 20th century, and frankly, why it remains significant today. So the first type of photograph she analyzes is a family photograph, something we all have that a lot of us maybe take for granted. And that's what she wants to get away from in the first part of this essay, is really to look at these types of photographs, analyze them, and understand why they're meaningful. Why did they give us this sort of emotional charge? Why do we have this nostalgic connection to them? So that's the first part of the essay. Second part is on vacation photos. And Sontag has a very dry sense of humor. She was a really prolific essayist, passed away about 15 years ago or so. Very well known for essays on movies and photography and painting and literature. And she was also known for having a really dry, often sarcastic sense of humor. And you're going to see that on page 10, especially, because at the bottom of page 9 to the middle of page 10 is where she goes into detail about family photographs, but vacation photographs specifically. So why do people take so many photographs when they're on vacation? What are they trying to do? And what do these photographs tell us about them and about their trips? So we'll talk about that more in a second. And then the third type of photograph she analyzes is on page 11 and page 12. And these would be news photographs, photographs in the media, in the news media. And today, obviously, that would also mean digital media, social media. In this case, she's writing this in the late 70s. All right. So that means she's thinking specifically of old-fashioned film photographs, Polaroids, and those sorts of things. So those are the 3 types of photographs she writes about. And at the beginning of the essay, very traditional in its structure, she has a 3-point thesis where she introduces each one of those types of photographs sort of briefly. And she says that in this essay, she's going to write about photography first as a social rite or tradition. In other words, that would be a family photograph. And you can think about that. Photographs, family photographs, if they're graduation photos, for example, wedding photos, they are about social traditions, right? About documenting these very high points in the family's life, right? So so social rite means these kind of social tradition of recording and taking photographs in order to document a family's life. And as she says, it's connectedness. That's the term that she uses on page 8. Second type of photograph, the vacation photo, she says, and this is her argument, and you can disagree with her if you want to, if you write about that topic. Topic number 2 is about using a photo as a defense against anxiety. Here's what she means by that. So she says people sometimes, especially Americans, she says, will go on vacations, and because they're workaholics, she says on page 10, and I'm summarizing how she says this, She says they will use a camera to appease the anxiety which the work-driven feel about not working when they are on vacation and they're supposed to be having fun. So maybe you know someone, maybe you yourself are like that. Maybe when you go on vacation, you take a lot of photos because, well, you want to document where you were. She talks about that, but maybe her argument is that some people that are so much a part of this workaholic culture don't know how to stop working. And so they just compulsively take photographs in order to feel that they are doing something of value or worth when they're on vacation. Now, you could certainly disagree with that point, and that's the one that she's trying to make here. And I think that was a little bit of self-parody as well, because I think she was known for taking a lot of photographs and was also married to a photographer. So I think that there was a little bit of she's looking at herself in the mirror there and having a little bit of fun. So the three topics for this paper, that's, as I said, probably the most fun, I think, of the three, because it does have a sense of humor to it that the other 2 points don't, because they're much more serious. And then again, the last part about news photographs on page 11 and 12 asks about the ethics of taking photographs. So professional journalists, for example, the ones that maybe had to cover the flooding and the hurricane in Louisiana last week, or journalists that had to cover the evacuations from Afghanistan a couple of weeks ago. What are the ethics of that? Where does the photographer draw the line? Where do they step in? If they see that someone's in danger, do they step in to help? Do they just document the situation, hoping that other people will be inspired to help? Is there something ethically wrong with documenting these kinds of human tragedies? So that's the most philosophical part of the essay. And I would say of the three topics for this paper, maybe the most complex, because it's asking you to get a photograph, to cite a photograph from a recent news article, and then to analyze it. So I would say of the three of them, that's the most probably challenging of the three. But again, it depends. It depends on which, where your thoughts are and what approach you want to take. So let me just briefly mention a little bit on each one of these, very, very briefly, because again, I'll pick up with this again in our next video. But one of the things she says about family photographs is she really focuses on why family photographs were and are meaningful to people that have migrated from different parts of a country, or from different countries, people that have emigrated. So for example, at the beginning of page 8, she talks about how family photographs gave that sense of being connected to relatives maybe you never had the opportunity to see again. And this was especially the case 100 years ago. I know that for a fact, especially from the Irish side of my family. As I mentioned on our Blackboard shell, my grandparents were born and raised in Ireland, came over here when they were in their 20s, and never went back. So they had family, they had brothers and sisters who were in Ireland, their families, their parents were there, but they didn't have the money to go back to visit them. And so photographs were the way to sort of pass on family traditions. And a great story of that, and I think I have a photo somewhere, speaking of photos, and maybe if I can find it, I'll show it to you. But when we were visiting our cousins in Ireland a few years ago, as we do every once in a while, we went to my aunt's house. She had just passed away. And sure enough, she had a picture of my grandmother taking at her wedding in the late 30s, early 1940s here in the US, that she had mailed back to Ireland so that her sister could see her wedding day. So it's a beautiful photo. And again, it was a way to show and continue that family connection at a time where, my grandparents didn't have the money to travel back to Ireland. It was the same case with the Lithuanians on my mom's side of the family, who arrived here in the US to escape having to serve in the Tsarist army, and also wanted to avoid the Soviet occupation when they came over in the early 20th century. But also, sadly, were never able to go back to visit their family members. They had to use photographs and letters in order to keep that connection. So that's the first part of the essay. She talks about that history and why photos continue to remain important because of making those connections to family members and to friends. Second part is I already mentioned about vacations and how people sometimes overdo it with the photos that they take. Still, it's a form of family photography, but one that's specific to being somewhere new and trying to document your experience, or maybe trying to impress other people to show like, oh, look, I saw the pyramids, or I saw the Eiffel Tower. So that's again, the more satirical part of the essay. And as I already mentioned, the news one is probably the most serious in terms of the ethical challenges that come about when you're being asked to document these human tragedies, these monumental historical events. Like, how do you do that? And how do you do it in a way that's respectful and that hopefully raises some awareness that maybe does bring some help to those people suffering on the Gulf Coast, for example. So these are all the types of photographs that she writes about. Let me stop my screen share here and come back and talk with you before I wrap this up. So those are the parts of the essay. So read it slowly, read it carefully. If you have any questions about any of it, please let me know. If the vocabulary you find difficult, just look up the words. If you can't figure out what she's trying to argue by her context, please make sure you look up the words or ask me for help, because again, it's a short piece, but there's a lot of complexity to it. And as I said, start on this paper early. You want to get your ideas together. You want to decide which of the 3 topics you want to do. And you'll also need to decide which type and photograph you're going to be writing about. So you want to really spend some time finding a photo that you'll enjoy writing about and that you'll have some points that you can describe in it. And I'll talk about how to structure that in the next couple of videos that I do. So as I always say, please make sure that you email me if you have any questions. I do have a visitor here who I just noticed came by. Rosie is here. It's very chilly out today, so she does not want to go outside and do these videos. So she's here with me. She says hello to you, and she hopes you're having a great day. We're going to have lunch here in a second, so I better wrap this video up. This is her signal that it's time for lunch. So again, please email me with any questions. I hope you enjoy the essay. She's a fabulous writer, and I think you're going to learn a lot from her. And I'm looking forward to seeing which topic you select, because I always get really fascinating papers with this second paper topic of the semester. So I will see you in the next video, where we will talk about The Rock, and who doesn't want to talk about Dwayne Johnson? So we'll talk about him and his essay in our next video coming up in a couple of days. See you then. Bye.